Hello, welcome. I'm Norton Owen, I'm Director of Preservation, and I want to welcome you to this Pillow Talk about Margaret Craske and her teachings. And I am very honored and delighted to have with us today Diana Byer, who is perhaps the best equipped person to talk with us about Margaret Craske. I want to just give you a brief bio because we're going to be speaking much more about both Diana's career as well as Ms. Craske's, but I would just like to identify that Diana Byer is director of New York Theater Ballet School and the founder and artistic director emerita of New York Theater Ballet and New York Theater Ballet School. She has had, yes, applause for that.
It's very kind. Thank you.
She has had important affiliations with the Anthony Tudor Trust, the Dance Notation Bureau, the Clive and Valerie Barnes Foundation, the New York Pops, the Children's Museum of Manhattan. And she has staged the ballets of Anthony Tudor and Agnes DeMille for American Ballet Theater and other companies. Most importantly for today, she was a longtime pupil and colleague of Margaret Craske, who was director of ballet instruction at New York Theater Ballet School until her retirement well into her 90s.
I think 95.
95.
Yeah.
Well, that's I think a pretty good advertisement
Teaching
for
7 classes a week.
Even at 95, she was teaching.
Even at 95.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I think also we're going to, in a minute, we will be going to a video where you give some background about Margaret Craske, but I want to just read 3 sentences to set the tone for who she was. She was born in England in 1892. She was co-author of 2 of the 3 authoritative textbooks that codified the Cecchetti technique, and her own teaching career spanned more than 60 years. She danced with Diaghilev's Ballet Russe for 2 years and studied with Enrico Cecchetti for 5 years. She began teaching at Jacob's Pillow shortly after she moved to America in the late 1940s, and she continued teaching here until 1972. So, much more to dig into here. I wonder if we can start with when you started with Miss Craske. How did that happen?
Well, I went to Juilliard, started in 1964, and I wasn't placed in Miss Craske's classes. I was placed with Tudor and Alfredo Corvino. And I would watch her classes sometimes, and I thought, there's no way I'll ever study with this woman.
What made you say that?
Well, I was a turner and a jumper, and she didn't let people do, 4 and 5 pirouettes, which is what I like to do, very wildly, mind you.
She would do 1 or 2
correctly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't that kind of a dancer, or that kind of a pupil, let me put it that way. So I started working with Christopher Lyle. He was my partner, and we were guesting all over. This is after I left Juilliard, and he said, you must study with Margaret Craske, come take a class. And I kept saying no. I kept resisting, I'm not going to study with her. And then finally I took 1 class, and for me, I had seen the light, and I never studied with anyone else.
Well, so tell me about it. What was it about the class then that was different for you?
It was so pure, and the teaching was so clear. Miss Craske did so much and said so little. I can't really explain it. It wasn't long explanations. It was a few words, and you just immediately knew the essence of the movement. And it was not about athleticism or pyrotechniques. It was using your eyes, using your gesture, being generous to the public, things like that. And it just after that first class, that I knew that's the way I wanted to study and the way I wanted to dance.
So at that time, were you able to? So you were no longer at Juilliard at that point.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was teaching at the Metropolitan Opera.
She was at the Old Met and also Manhattan School of Dance.
And so
Robert Osorio.
So you were able to at that point just sign on for taking as many classes as you could.
Because I didn't stay at Juilliard. I only stayed a year because I started to get work. And then in those days, they had an extension division, and you could go and just study dance with one of the teachers. So I went on the extension division because Tudor was going to use me in Lilac Garden. And
So you said that right away you knew after you
Yeah.
took that class, but certainly it must have developed over time. I mean, you didn't know at the beginning, like, oh, someday I'll be at Jacob's Pillow talking about the whole lifetime that I've spent with Margaret Craske. How did it develop over time? I mean, if you were a regular student, she was seeing you.
yeah,
Daily?
I was a regular student. I never missed a class. I would sit and watch the children's classes kind of in the back because I was so curious how she did this with so few words. One correction corrected a multitude of sins. And it was, I wanted to learn how to do that.
Did you tell her that you wanted to learn
no.
how?
God, no.
So you
No.
were just lurking.
Yeah, I was
yeah.
lurking in the background. And when I first started studying with her, I would do grand pliés, demi pliés, and then grand battements was always third. I would do 2 grand battements to the front, and that was it. I had to go to the water fountain and practice grand battement, and that was for 2 years.
Maybe you should explain that was her way of instilling.
Well, I wanted high extension, but I would take my hip up and turn in, so that was not acceptable because it was incorrect. And I insisted on getting my leg up, and
she insisted on sending you to the water fountain.
Yeah, and that's where you went. If you weren't doing something properly and she thought you could do it correctly, you were sent to the water fountain. And she usually forgot that you were there. So I would grand battement and grand battement. And I have to tell you, when she left New York and was at Myrtle Beach, some of us would fly down to see her. I still got corrected on grand battement. It's true. It's a true story.
Would she send you out of the room at that point, or
No.
Okay, well, I'm glad some things.
She was a little kinder.
She mellowed over
Yeah.
time. I wonder if you can say about. I mean, you alluded to it a little bit in terms of saying how subtle what she gave in terms of gesture and eyes and so forth. But what is it? How is the Cicchetti training different than what you had, for instance?
Well, I had only gone twice a week to Mr. Kiernan in Trenton, New Jersey, so it was completely different. But for me, we did things where you used your eyes, did a gesture of generosity, and we would do a simple port de bras to many different kinds of music sometimes, where you had to change the quality to match the music. And it wasn't about athletics at all. It was about giving something to the audience, and it was a true art form, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, but it gets at an essence that I think probably is very different than the way many people teach.
Yeah, it was simple. It was really extremely simple, but true.
Is it something then that makes it possible are you able to spot a Cicchetti trained dancer?
I just taught teachers at the International Cicchetti Council in Michigan. Just two weeks ago, was I there? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. And I have to say no. Not today. I think maybe years ago I could. But there were some...
What's different?
It's more today. I think it's just kind of blended in the way companies sort of look the same nowadays. In the old days, you wanted to see the Paris Opera was so different than ballet theater, and that was so different from the Royal Danish, and that was so different than the Royal Ballet. And now it's kind of same body types, and I don't want to be negative because there's gorgeous dancers, so I don't mean that. But stylistically, it's very much the same. But I do have to say, there are a few people from Australia and South Africa that were beautifully trained, really beautifully trained.
So you feel like it's become more homogenous in a way that the
yeah, I mean, you want your students to have a job, so you kind of teach to the fad, and Miss Craske never ever taught to the fad, ever.
How about you?
Never.
That was not a trick question. I just wondered how you would
No,
answer
I dig my
that.
heels in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and how would you say, after having studied with Miss Craske for so many years, did you teach exactly as she taught, or did you? How was your teaching different than how she taught?
That's a really hard, because I'm not Miss Craske, and I try my best to keep her legacy alive and the aesthetic of her teaching. I still teach the children the same way. They start class in a circle. I stand in the middle, and they do corrective spine exercises. Then they do a hornpipe, a polka, a Viennese waltz, something like that. Then they go to the bar. The bar is extremely simple. It's not choreographed. It's not for the teacher to choreograph, lots of stuff. It's to prepare you for the center, which prepares you for your day. So I do the best I can, and I keep her in my mind all the time when I'm teaching.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the hornpipe and the tarantella that she did. One of the things, as I was reading about her preparing for today, that surprised me was that she was active in the music halls in England. So, can you talk about that part of her career?
In my book, I have a quote from her, but while I look for it, she was with Nanette de Valois and Marie Rambert, and they were Bluebell girls in the music halls. And she has, I hope I can find it quickly, she did a great quote about it.
So, here, can I hold that for you?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, okay. But I just think it's surprising, particularly with what you were just telling us about simplicity and so forth. That's sort of the opposite of what you would think would be going on in the English music halls. But
what she says,
yes, what?
The English music halls. I learned so much about the theater from the music halls, almost more than I did from theater. But I have more.
Okay.
Wait, there's.
But wait, there's more.
Hang on. I've done all this research on her.
That's why you're here.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Miss Craske toured the English provinces with a group that included Nanette de Valois and Marie Rambert, performing in English music halls and variety theaters. She said, "It was divine. That was absolutely the most wonderful audience in the world. If they didn't like you, they threw things."
Well, that keeps you honest, doesn't it? I was also reading something about that she and Cyril Beaumont had a company together called the Beau Craske Dancers.
Yep. Yeah, but it didn't last long.
Yeah. Although it sounds like a really interesting enterprise.
She always says that she choreographed the first circus ballet and other people copied her.
Oh, and also that's interesting because it was she didn't become known as a choreographer in any way. Yeah.
No.
So after that, because at that time she was making dances.
Yes. Yeah.
But she must have realized, okay, that's not my path.
Yeah. In the films, the films that they did here, 3 of the children did the 3 children's dances that she choreographed. It's a fabulous tarantella, an English country dance, and a Russian scarf dance. That was her choreography. And she would pick one each year, and the children would learn them. And I do it as well in my class, because it really teaches the kids dancing and how to get a style and a character across to the audience and kind of remove themselves from it and become that character. So, and the choreography is terrific, I think, terrific.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned the films, I want to bring that aspect, because that's actually the reason that we're here, is because of an effort that has begun now with a company called Dancio. I wonder if you could say a little bit about that.
Well, Dancio, Caitlin Traynor had asked me to do some children's classes for her, because they had never done children's classes. And this is, it was formed during COVID, and you could buy classes so that you could do class at home. And Julie Kent taught class, Wendy Whalen, a lot of people, but nobody did children's classes, so I got asked to do that. and they were very popular. So she asked me to do this whole series of classes for children and adults, and professionals, and you can, I guess, purchase them. I'm not really clear how you get to them, but I think you can do it online. You can get it online.
Yeah, you're not a sales agent here, but I know, but that it's called, it's spelled Dancio, Dancio.
Yeah. And I tried to give as Miss Craske's work and the way the bar was and the way the center was and some of the corrections that she used to give.
So I wanted to actually show folks something of this. And so to start out, this may repeat some of the information we've just given, but I loved the introduction that you did as part of the program. So I thought we should play that because not only do you hear Diana speaking about Ms. Craske, but you also see there's some footage in this introduction showing her teaching here at the Pillow. So you'll get a sense of place about all of that too. So let's see this first clip.
Hello everyone, I'm Diana Byer and I am here at the fabulous Jacob's Pillow for Dancio. I'll be teaching several classes, all based on the teachings of Margaret Craske and the Giacchetti technique. Margaret Craske was my teacher, my mentor, my good friend. The classes you'll be seeing are based on the way she taught the Giacchetti method. I'd like to tell you a little bit about her. Ms. Craske was born in 1892 and passed away in 1990. She was a pupil of Enrico Giacchetti, and when Giacchetti retired to Italy in 1923, she took over the teaching at his school in London. She taught and developed the Giacchetti method in England and later in the United States. She first taught in American Ballet Theatre at the request of Anthony Tudor, and also taught at the Metropolitan Opera House, the Juilliard School, Manhattan School of Music, and right here at Jacob's Pillow in this exact studio. Her pupils included Frederick Ashton, Margot Fontaine, Robert Helpman, Anthony Tudor, Sally Wilson, Nora Kay, Alicia Alonso, Jerome Robbins, Hugh Lang, Peggy Van Praagh, Melissa Hayden, Paul Taylor, and Carolyn Brown, among many, many other well-known dancers. Giacchetti wrote a letter of recommendation for her, stating that she was one of the few who understood the principles of his work. And now I'd like to read you something that she wrote for Dance Magazine in 1949. It's called Ballet Mistress at Work, How Margaret Craske Trains New Members of the Corps de Ballet in an Integrated Unit. All systems of teaching ballet are basically the same. There is very little difference actually between the so-called Italian school, Giacchetti method, and the Russian school. Whatever slight differences there may be lie mainly in the placing of the body. The Giacchetti system itself may be summed up briefly by saying that it aims to give the body freedom through a system which puts the body through a rigid discipline. The body is kept strongly disciplined. It is gradually freed from that discipline until it begins to dance on a physical as well as a musical plane. This is a process which must actually take place as much in the mind as it does in the body, for the mind must be made to feel that the body has learned technique to the point where it need not be thought about. The body can then be made an instrument, and emotions, any emotions, can be expressed through and with the body. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy all of these classes.
Yay! It's such a great introduction, and it really does set the scene. I'm so glad we were able to do this project here.
I'm so grateful that it was possible, because for me, it's a home. For me, I've been coming since 1968. So.
And you studied with Miss Craske here.
Yes, I did.
So you had already been studying with her in the city?
Yeah.
And then because of that, she thought you should come up here too?
Well, she didn't think it, I thought it.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Well, I love that. And actually, you know, in another clip that I've chosen from this, you tell a story that is very much about also the pillow. So I think we should maybe go ahead and see this other clip too. Yeah, so let's see the second clip.
Now we're going to do tandus, but before we do tandu, I've got to tell everybody a story. I used to study here at the Pillow with Margaret Craske in the 60s, late 60s. And it was in this exact studio. And if we had trouble with a step and Miss Craske didn't feel that you were getting it, and she felt that you actually could get it, but you didn't put the work in, she would send you out the door, and you had to hold on to a tree that's right outside this studio and practice until she let you back in. And one day, there was this young man who didn't get the rhythm of tandu, and she felt he could get it, and he hadn't put the time in. And she corrected him in the class. He still didn't get it, so it was out. And he went outside to practice his tandu. Well, it started to rain, and he was very diligent, I have to say. And after the class, we went outside, and there he was practicing his tandu in the pouring rain, soaking wet, holding onto the tree. The tree is in this little circle that has a lot of gravel and sticks. It's exactly the same as it was in the late 60s. And whenever I give a tandu, that image of him out there in the rain just really cracks me up. So why don't you go look at the tree? It's right there. And Miss Craske forgot that he was out there, and it was raining and thundering. So it just gives me great memories of the Pillow. I have to say, I was always sent out for Grand Baptement. I remember holding on to that tree.
I love that, and I love, you know, it so also speaks to some of the things that we value so highly here at the Pillow, of having the environment still holding all these memories.
It does.
And I love that you instruct the dancers to go look at the tree. And that means you better get everything right.
Yeah, I was ready to send one of them out there, to tell you the truth.
So do you use that method in your own teaching?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay.
I know it's not what you should do nowadays, but I do. I mean, I think that you're there to study, and if you don't do the work, why are you there? But I will always teach with an assistant, so they go with the assistant. I don't have a water fountain, so they go in the corner with the assistant to get one-on-one help while I keep the class pace going.
And hopefully it won't rain in the studio either.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, our studio does leak, I have to tell you.
Okay, that was too hasty.
That big rain the other day, we had buckets.
That's wild. So I want to get into another aspect of Miss Craske's life, which was so important to her, which was the teachings of Baba, and it was very early on, 1931. So she would have been just about 40, I guess, at the time when she first encountered Mayor Baba, and was devoted to his teachings for the rest of her life.
Yeah. She was a disciple.
I wonder if you could tell us both something about him and the teachings, and what it was that you think was so vital for her. You know, what was it about this mode of spirituality that really seemed to?
Let me just.
Yeah, you're looking for something to read.
Because I also have some quotes about that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll fill in as you look to say that one of the things that I think has always been notable is that not only was she a follower, but then other people who followed her became followers, and I think that says something about her convictions, about her belief, and about how people wanted seemingly, genuinely wanted to adopt a lifestyle that she espoused.
But I do have to say, she never brought it into the class. This was something in her private life. You were not expected to follow Mayor Baba. Certainly, if you were inquisitive, she was there to talk to you about it. But I have a very good quote, if I can find it.
Yeah, so she wasn't necessarily proselytizing or pushing it in any way, but
I found it.
Okay. But she was definitely, this was
the
core to her
major
being.
part. Yeah, it definitely was the core of her being. Her spiritual life was a very important part of everything she did. She said, between 1929 and 1931, everything I valued disappeared. My father died, my mother died, the man I was in love with died, Diaghilev died, Anna Pavlova died. She was a great friend of Anna Pavlova's. So I was quite in a bad state. I had spent my life looking for God and now thought it was all nonsense. I was not going to look anymore. I had had enough. I resolved to go somewhere to recover enough to decide what to do next. It was then that she met Mayor Baba, who became her spiritual guide throughout the rest of her life. And she kept this part of her life very private. It did not come into class at all. But since it was such a deep part of her being, you could almost feel it in her teaching. So.
Yeah, can you say more about that in terms of you could almost feel it in her teaching? So I mean, one of the things that I just noted as I was reading a little bit about Mayor Baba and also about her was that he apparently took, I don't know whether it was a vow of silence, but he didn't speak after
Correct.
1931. So, the idea of silence and how powerful that could be. I mean, I certainly could see, because you've mentioned that she was a woman of few words in the class.
In the class.
Yeah. Okay, you
She
make a
was-
distinction
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she, outside of class, she
She was one of the great storytellers of the world.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I think that the teaching was never about her. It wasn't about her personality. It was about teaching and the work and what she was giving to the pupils. It was almost like a selflessness, which I think is an odd way of saying it, maybe. But you know how sometimes your personality comes into it, and you're the students love you because you're so like this, and it wasn't about that. It was quiet.
Yeah.
And it was about a true art form, and it was her giving it all away. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It wasn't held. It was selflessly giving the information to the pupils.
It does, and I think, one thing I haven't remarked on yet, but, the photograph of her that we're seeing on the two screens here, which was something that Diana hadn't seen before, because I will say, like all of the photos that are in the gallery at this point, this is a color photograph by John Lindquist, and he didn't print color, so all of the color work, this as well as everything else you're seeing on the walls, were things that were really not seen. And so we are seeing this photo anew, but one of the things that speaks to me in this photo, I've certainly seen plenty of other photos where she's smiling, but she's looking rather stern in this one, whether she wasn't in the mood to have her picture taken or what. But I think you do get something of her personality by seeing just how simple she is. That she's not trying to put on a glamour act. She's not smiling broadly for the camera. She just is.
But can I read this, Sally
Yes,
Wilson?
please.
I have a quote from Sally Wilson that I think really tells you who Margaret Craske was. And this was right after she had passed away.
Maybe let's just first say who Sally Wilson was. So she was a dancer with American Ballet Theater, very well known for that. But earlier in her career, actually, she started out in 1951. She was here with Anthony Tudor as part of a small group. But she became, and she was a great tutor ballerina. So
Yeah.
she, in Pillar of Fire, in
Lilac Garden.
Lilac Garden,
Dark
yes.
Elegies. Yeah, she was, for me, one of the great ballerinas of her generation, and a wonderful teacher as well. When Miss Craske passed, she became the director of instruction at the school and the coach for the company. But she wrote this, I just think it captures Miss Craske so well. When she walked into the studio, the large class was quiet, everyone placed at the bar and already standing in second position. After a moment, she said softly, "Lift up your bodies," and the room seemed to rise as the pliés started, and my heart leaped. This was my first introduction to Margaret Craske, and I knew she was my teacher. Her teaching was harmonious and real. Ballet was unfolded to us as something natural, never artificial. We learned placement as a moving study, placement in the air, on the ground, on point, in adagio, in action. It manifested itself in line, expression, feeling, breath, ease. What for a time might seem pedantic and repetitious and difficult turned out to be discipline that freed us. She made sure that we knew what we were learning, why we were learning it, and what it was used for. She asked us to learn movement by seeing it, the shape, the whole, the details. The scope of her teaching was infinite. Technique was all important, but that was but a small part of dance, a tool to work within the dancer. There is really no way to describe the experience working with Miss Craske. She was the light of our lives, illuminating and inspiring and more. Makes me cry.
Oh, that's very beautiful.
Isn't that beautifully written?
What was the occasion for Sally to write that?
I found it doing research, and it's from a magazine, and I ordered it, and it never came. And I don't have it in my notes, the name of it, but I can look it up. It was some interview that was written up in a magazine that she gave.
I see. And there are other efforts that you've made, I should say, aside from the Dancio, and we will look at another clip from that, but you've also done other kinds of documentation efforts in terms of her teaching. I know there were some interviews that you were instituting
Well, we did something at 92Y where we showed that it was all about Margaret Craske, and we had a panel of Donald Mahler, Matthew Nash, they've both passed, Jean Volpe, Antonia Franceschi, and myself. I was the moderator. And we did some of the dances and classes. And there's a whole group of classes that were filmed in 1973, I think it was.
So that would have been just after she stopped teaching here. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And
was
so
this at Manhattan School of
Manhattan
Dance?
School of Dance, yeah.
And those exist at the New York Public Library?
They do. We gave them there. And by chance, the last class she ever taught was filmed, and that was an accident.
Wow.
So I have that. Yeah.
Wow. So at 95.
Yeah.
Wow.
But still energetic and, yeah. I mean, even where she was teaching was at my studio, and the elevator didn't always work, and we were on the 5th floor. And even at that age, took her a while. But she did not miss teaching, whether the elevator worked or not. She was there. And in all my years of studying with her, she was only late once, and she came into the room, and because we were never allowed to be late. You couldn't take class. And she said, "Well, why are you letting me teach? I was late."
Touché. Yeah, that's funny. Well, I also, through some of my reading, she had some physical mishaps in her later years. Tell about the taxi.
Yeah, it wasn't really when she was that old. She accidentally closed a taxi door on her coat, and the driver didn't know that had happened, and he took off, and he drove about a block before that was realized, and she always had a limp after that. Because, someone from that generation didn't run to the hospital or to the doctor the way we do now. because in those days, when she was young, you went to the hospital to pass away. So she, as far as I know, she never went
Oh my
to
gosh.
a doctor for that. I took her when she had jaundice. And she looked at, do you remember this, when she had jaundice? And I said, Miss Craske, you're yellow. I think you've got to see a doctor. And she, no. And finally I got her to go, and she looked around at his certificates on the wall. She said, this is not for me. And she went home, and she cured herself with
Oh my gosh.
cherry juice and a clove of raw garlic.
Ooh.
She ate a clove of raw garlic, not a clove, a head
Yeah.
of garlic every day, and drank cherry juice and got rid of it.
Okay. Well, so would that have been part of her spiritual practice also in
I have
terms
no
of?
idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but I do. She was very. She ate healthy, and I remember sitting here at the Pillow one night with Miss Craske and Ted Shawn, and they were by her cabin, and I was sitting on the grass, and they were telling stories, and I was bitten up by mosquitoes from head to toe, and so was Ted, but not Miss Craske. Not one mosquito bite, because she had her apple cider vinegar and water that she was sipping. And she had not one mosquito bite.
All right, we're going to set you up at a stand out here, and you can sell apple cider vinegar, and I'm sure you'll do big business.
Oh,
Yeah,
God. I
yeah.
tried it once, and I couldn't get it down. I
Yeah.
don't know how she did it.
Well, I want to, we do, as I said, have one more clip that I want to share. And this really, this is the one, even though, of course, the videos are all about teaching and not about just anecdotes, as I've been showing. But I think this one, we get to see a little bit of you interacting with one of the dancers. So let's watch this third clip.
Yeah, Emily and Charlotte, I'm going to give you something less advanced because you're not ready to do this. Why don't you go off to the side, and I'll give you something else. Yeah, I want to see the fouette. I want to see the dart. Those changes of feeling. All right, here we go. Other side. And... Fill it now. Julian, you didn't fill it out. Yeah. I'm really nagging him about this. He did not fill out the arms. He missed half the movements. And it makes the movement too light, especially for the man. You know, it's careless. I'm sorry, but it is careless, and it's my job as a teacher to say that. I cannot say everything is good. You know, when it's not. And I think you have to be not mean, not nasty, but truthful. Yeah, it was not there.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm a little scared of you, but.
Well, but he wasn't. I don't know if you could see.
Yeah, it's actually I love that segment because it's very real for one thing. I mean, even though of course you had a plan for these classes, but you're really teaching in them too.
Well, but what it was kind of teaching how to do the movements for teachers to watch, and I was trying to emphasize that if it's not correct, you got to fix it. You know, you can't just jump around, like and kick your head. You know, just kick your head. So.
Well, I think that's clear. Yeah. So noted.
I said it kindly.
Yes, yes, you did. Yeah. Yeah, also want to highlight that in addition to the Dancio videos that we've seen and these other documentation efforts that you've mentioned, that you're writing an essay for us for the Jacob's Pillow Dance Interactive.
Yeah.
So that is also on Miss Craske,
Yes,
right?
yeah. I just handed it in the first draft.
Yeah, so this is something just for everybody to know. danceinteractive.jacobspillow.org is the website, and we have an area of that called Themes and Essays. And we actually don't have a lot yet about dance instruction that is there, but I think that this will be a great addition to it, and also very pillow-centric because she was so much a part of the faculty here for so long.
Yeah.
And so watch for that, for sure. And I want to give us an opportunity at this point to, if there are any questions from among us, and I'm seeing a hand already. Boy, you were just waiting. Okay. And I'm going to repeat the question so that everybody can hear. Yes. So a question about why Miss Craske left the pillow. I have my own supposition, but what do you know something?
I don't really know. I wonder if it was because she started teaching at the Met so much.
Well,
I
mean, what I know is that
she never talked about it to me.
Yeah. What it coincides with, though, is Sean's death. And she continued to teach her as long as he was around. But I think, Sharon is here, who probably, so the first year was 1973 when Walter... Yeah, so it was that in 1973, Walter Terry came in as director and kind of cleaned house in terms of who was on faculty, certainly who was on stage. I remember him saying that the seasons at that point, in the last few years of Sean's life, Walter said, well, the seasons looked like they had been planned out of somebody's old address book, which was a little bit of a dig there. But I think he felt the same way about the faculty, that it changed a lot at that point in time.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
That it had nothing to do with the Met. Yeah, she never talked about it to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Yeah, so what Sharon McDonald is sharing here is that as a scholarship student in 1973, that she had the experience of just guest teachers coming in and not the same kind of continuity that Miss Craske had when she would be here for an entire summer, essentially. I think Joan Kunch in the back has a question. So this is a question about whether the Cicchetti teacher, Margaret Saul, had any connection with Margaret Craske.
As far as I know, yes, but I don't know a lot about it. But she did mention her off and on. She was my teacher. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Joan has added that Margaret Saul was her teacher. Was she any relationship to Peter Saul? Or that's a different Saul?
No, that's a different Saul.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I wish you would tell the story, which I read also, and I'm sure you know it, because Peter Saul was with her, I think, close to the time of her death.
Yeah, and Peter, he wrote to me, and he said she was on her deathbed in the hospital, and she looked up at Peter and said, "Please do an entrechat with my fingers."
So she was still dancing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think Melinda has.
Yes, Melinda. So this is
well
a
said.
comment.
That was well
A
said.
comment from Melinda Buckwalter, who says she studied with both Miss Craske and with Diana Byer, and saying how well the two of them worked together and how they complemented each other, and the idea of simplicity, which Melinda saw in the teaching, and how that resonates for her in terms of Baba's teaching also, and in terms of not putting anything, a lot of frou-frou on top of the movement, but just letting the movement speak for itself. Do you have a response?
And I think this thing of not going towards the fad of the time, to kind of keeping what's true, it was important.
Well, yeah. And Melinda is pointing out. Thank you. The audience is helping with the content here. I studied with Loren Hightower, who was known as Tex for most of his life, and in fact, I think it might have been one of the last times I saw him was here in this room when Melinda brought him to a PillowTalk that we were doing at that point, and which was very meaningful to have him here because he had come here to Jacob's Pillow as a student in 1947, which is allegedly when he got the name Tex. And you didn't know that? Yeah. And he then, well, he was at the Metropolitan Opera, which was probably where he first encountered Miss Craske, but studied with her and really was a disciple as well, and was also a follower of Baba, and so that's where he went to Myrtle Beach also, where there's the center. Right. Yeah, thank you for bringing him into the room. Ina. So a comment and a question, a comment of how wonderful it is that you are doing what you do, and what is your awareness of other schools that are furthering Cicchetti's technique?
I have to say I don't think so. You know, it's not popular. I mean, the bar is simple. There's no port or bras. It's just to get you on, you know, to prepare you for what you're going to do next. It's not about the teacher being creative in, you know, choreographing. It's everything's so simple. It's not the style nowadays. You know, the bar was 20 minutes, 25 minutes. That's not how people give a class. Miss Craske taught a class, two different things.
Mm. Can you say more about that, giving a class versus teaching a class?
Well, you know, you kind of give what you feel like giving that day. Miss Craske saw what you needed, and she taught you how, what Sally said, the how and the why and the meaning. That was really taught. You knew what you were doing and why you were doing it and how to fix it. It wasn't just kind of the teacher gives this long combination and you jump around and you have a great time and it feels good inside. That's not what she was about. And I just really don't know teachers that are doing that right now.
Yeah, so just want to repeat for the camera that Gina Gibney is sharing that that a lot of what she sees today is dancers who don't want to be corrected and teachers more or less assenting to that, and also the different ideas now about touching students and so forth. So I wonder, Diana, you
I
said
touch the students carefully, but at the beginning of each year, I meet with the parents and tell them, if you don't want your child touched, I need it in writing. And I've never encountered a problem. And also with correcting, it's, you know, you're the adult, you're the teacher, you're the one that knows the material. Get over it. Is the way I feel, you know. I don't think you can give in to that. I mean, at least I don't. And I do have problems sometimes, but then they have to leave, frankly. You know, I think you're the adult in the room, you know. And even with professional dancers, I mean, I remember Margot Fontaine used to take Miss Craske's elementary point class when she was in town. And it's a funny story because the pianist didn't know much about dancing, but Miss Craske liked her. And when Fontaine was in the beginner point class, she whispered to Miss Craske, "Did you see that one? I think she has talent." But I feel really strongly about this, that I think that teachers give in, and you're the teacher. I mean, explain why you get corrected. It's not about the ego. It's not about you personally. I know it's a problem today, but I think the more everybody gives in, the worse it gets.
Yeah. So,
But
Yes, the
I
comment was that the institutions are reinforcing that. Yeah.
But then somebody has to deal with it because people are not being taught, they're not listening. I know it's simplistic to say you got to deal with it. It's not easy, but, and that's but in big letters, it's got to be done. I mean, you're there to learn. It's not about you. It's about what you're going to give to somebody else. So for me, it's like, get over it.
Mm-hmm. So we are coming to the end of our hour, but you very generously have brought some handouts, and I wonder if you would tell people what is over there on the table, which is...
There's the one from Behind Bars by Joseph Gale.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a wonderful photo of Miss Craske at Jacob's Pillow. It's the one on the left. And then the one on the right is an interview that she did that I thought was really wonderful. So I made copies for everybody.
Yeah, and I should say also that the one from Behind Bars, which is a great, it's Barres, by the way. But he looks at 7 different teachers, 7, and Miss Craske is one of them. So I think that says something right there in terms of her place in the Pantheon. Yeah. And I'd say that your place in the Pantheon is assured for having brought all of this along. I mean, and without the people who are going to keep passing it along, where are we? So thank you, Diana Byer.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.